Now, maybe we go back to the question of the support, though, because you have this group, the Invisible Children, and their TRI fundraising arm. We would have to say that in objective terms, this is functioning as a kind of propaganda arm or cheering section for the U.S. AFRICOM and their desire to partially invade Uganda, but use Uganda, build up Uganda for this task of destroying, as they have to every 10 years or so, destroying all of those countries. And if you look at that area on the map, around Lake Victoria, right, the Lakes District of Africa, that's where everything comes together. You got Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Kenya, Somalia.
It's the center of the chessboard strategically.
About a dozen countries, more or less, in that area. But now, from the U.S. point of view, you've got George Clooney. You've got all of these Hollywood characters, right?
The fake liberal fascist.
Yeah, and mushheads and whatever. This is the thing that Obama has been able to do. And this was also another important theme of that book, Obama, the Postmodern Coup. When you had Bush and Cheney after 9/11, Bush was once asked, what should the American people do now that there's this huge terror emergency, which, of course, we know is a fraud. And Bush said, go to the shopping center, go to the mall and buy a bunch of stuff and keep the economy going. There were left liberal elites, left liberal warmonger elites that were beside themselves in rage when they heard that. And it's not because they didn't like war. They wanted total war. They wanted more than Bush was able or willing to give them. One of the people here is this Samantha Power. She's now sitting in the White House, right? She's one of the people running the color revolutions across the world. Samantha Power was on the phone with Tantawi and Inan, right, the generals in Egypt, telling them, get Mubarak out, follow orders, you bums, or, you know, you'll be next, and all this stuff. Samantha Power wanted Bush to say total war, total sacrifice, total mobilization, not go and buy yourself something nice at the mall. And now you see, under Bush and Cheney, it was enough if you were sort of passively supporting imperialism, right? All you had to do was to vote, you know, for Bush, Cheney, neocon candidates.
No, now Obama is arresting hundreds of reporters, Espionage Act, arresting whistleblowers, NDAA, secret arrest of citizens. We're going to censor the web. They march into Congress and say, you don't declare war. UN and NATO does it now. I mean, it is reaching just... But because he's a liberal and because he has darker skin, it's like, you know, he could start worshiping Hitler and it'd be okay now because it's like he's liberal. I mean, it's just like murder everybody. He's liberal.
I would say Mussolini is more up his alley, but we can handle that another time. But you see what he's been able to do. 5 years ago, the campuses where Invisible Children is now recruiting and getting money were hotbeds of anti-war, anti-Bush Cheney, pro-impeachment.
Now they're taking the leftover to make them pro-war.
Exactly.
The new anti-war activism is proxy war, proxy state, civil war, genocide, and the new trendy thing is to support new genocides because there's some phantom guy with 500 followers in the jungle somewhere. Let's kill another 7 mil.
Right, and of course, again, the fact that the International Criminal Court only seems to be interested in people that are black or at least brown is also another giveaway. But now you've got Invisible Children going on campus and organizing college kids, privileged youth in many ways, to demand war. So this is a huge transition from the passive acceptance of imperialist crimes under Bush Cheney to the active participation. I mean, maybe the next step would be, you know, form an international brigade, you know, send volunteers, who knows what it is, right? But more and more mobilization for aggression, for war, for the imposition of these imperialist policies. And of course, totally mindless. Why is there a crisis in Uganda? Well, you know, they had Idi Amin. Idi Amin was backed by the U.S. and the British as long as he was in power. Then they decided to dump him. Then you had Obote. Then you had a couple of other people in the meantime. And one of them was a Acholi. And then when the Acholi was thrown out, in comes Museveni. Sure. And then the Acholi said, well, then we're going to have to defend ourselves. And that's really the origin of this crazy...
All right, let me stop you right there then. Because let's go back here. I remember seeing documents from the late 40s after World War II when Africa wanted freedom, wanted to throw off colonialism, where they, going back to Prince Philip and, of course, then the Queen of the Netherlands' husband, Prince Bernhard, they set up World Wildlife Fund. They set up all these groups, and I've seen the declassified documents. I've covered them, where they, all the way down to the middle of Africa and then over towards the east, down the rift, they got the countries to set up nature preserves. But in some cases that were more than 20% of the countries. But it was contiguous as a green belt, a migration corridor, not for animals and elephants and things and giraffes, but for troops and rebel forces to overthrow countries that didn't play ball. So they play both ends. They play the rebels, they also play the governments that work with them, all part of an overall strategy of destabilization. How does that tie into it, and how are things going for the New World Order? I mean, you've been to Iran recently, you've been to Libya, you've been to Syria, I mean, you've been everywhere, you've witnessed it. How is the overall program going for them with the Russians vetoing, you know, the UN program to go into, I mean, they're already doing it through proxies, but to do it with airstrikes, you know, part 2 of Libya in Syria. So now they're saying, well, we'll just go it alone. I mean, how are things going for them? But first, the use of nature corridors as rebel force bases.
Well, that's, of course, the founders of the World Wildlife Fund, Prince Philip and Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands. Let's remember, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands was actually a German nobleman who was officially, on paper, card-carrying member of the Nazi SA, the brown shirts, the Sturmabteilung, and of the black-shirted SS, where he was part of the noble, aristocratic branch, right? The Reiter SS. So that's Bernhard. So they after World War II, they discovered that the way to go is radical ecologism. And as you say, they built up all of those nature parks. And a lot of times the nature parks were astride borders. In other words, there'd be a nature park on one side, and then on the other side of the border, some other country, there'd be another nature park. And it meant that the smuggling routes could go through these parks, and Philip and Bernhard could get their cut. Philip, of course, is somebody who's got a whole history of collaboration in that sense back in his biography, which we didn't hear about when we had the royal wedding this past summer. So that's one thing. Now, obviously, today you need different methods. They've gone through this huge war in this area around the lakes, around Congo. Congo, of course, very important. Katanga province has the minerals. Zimbabwe in the south. You'll be hearing about them too, right? The U.S. and the British still want to get the government of Zimbabwe overthrown, right? Mugabe is their enemy because Mugabe is, whatever he is, he's stable and he deals with the Chinese, and similarly for these other countries. So I think you can assume right now that there are U.S. troops and U.S. drones flying in all of those places. I mean, they're not going to respect borders in that area. So
well, the White House has said that they'll kill anybody, anywhere in the world. More than 20,000 drones operating, killing 24/7, and they say they'll kill citizens here with them if they want.
Right now, but now in terms of the big picture, the Anglo-Americans are apoplectic because they have been blocked. Putin is now the president-elect of Russia, and Putin, after this prolonged period of appeasement and weakness that we had with Medvedev, Putin has taken a clear stand, I think.
Let me stop you. So Medvedev was not just a placeholder for Putin. I mean, what's your evidence of that? Because they were little buddy boys.
Yeah, look, at that level of power, there's no such thing as a close personal friendship, really, because as soon as you had the entire imperialist world, right, the U.S., the British, the continental European puppet states, all of them piling in favor of Medvedev, it meant that Medvedev had power, and he's responsible.
And he had the hamburger summit, so you think he bought into it?
Degraded. Look, that's why the ruling parties lost the election in early December. Putin was not on the ballot. Medvedev was. Medvedev of hamburger diplomacy, cavorting with Obama, fawning on Gates and Jobs and these rip-off artists of Silicon Valley. The average Russian is just disgusted by that. So, thank goodness, Michael McFaul, the guy who ran the destabilization of Egypt, among other things. Michael McFaul was sent as the U.S. ambassador to Moscow in January. His task was throw together, improvise a color revolution. They called it the White Revolution. Inside the country, it was called the Orange Revolution. I had a chance to talk to a very interesting Russian by the name of Maxim Shevchenko. It's very interesting. On one day in the first week of February, there was an anti-Putin demonstration of about 50,000 people in Moscow, and that there was a demonstration of 150,000 people at Victory Park, Poklonaya Hill, outside Moscow, that was addressed by this guy Shevchenko and some others. It was 3 times bigger. The U.S. media didn't report that, and this was pro-Putin, but critically pro-Putin. It was not, blank check for Putin.
But let me stop you for a minute. I had Colonel Anthony Schaefer, who's, high-level intelligence connections, and he said, A, these wars are illegal, are treason, and went over the evidence, but he also said yes. And he said a lot of folks in the Pentagon say, leave Russia alone. They're not trying to be expansionist. Why mess with them? Why poke them? And then a lot of Pentagon folks think messing with Russia will make them actually get behind hardliners. So again, when the Pentagon's speaking out, or sources are, what's the stratagem then to mess and poke with Russia? Because history shows Russia only unifies when it's under attack, and that this isn't going to work. And then the West admitted they're trying to do a color revolution and disrupt their elections over there. I mean, and it obviously didn't work.
Yeah, the word orange, right? Orange means the Kiev color revolution of 2004. Orange in Russian is bad. It's like, yellow, right? It's a bad color to be. So there was an anti-orange movement. The thing with Russia now is Russia has drawn a red line around Syria, as far as I can see. Medvedev refused to draw a red line around Libya, although he could have. And the ambassador Chamov said to him, "You're a traitor." And this guy Shevchenko that I'm telling you about went on Russian state television and said, Medvedev has committed a crime. And Shevchenko was fired. Well, now Shevchenko is back, so he's on Moscow television most nights. So the idea is the only thing, and it's the only thing, stopping the U.S., the British, NATO, and the Israelis from launching an attack on Syria and Iran is the fact that Putin is back. The Russians have sent their fleet to Tartus, right? The port. I've seen the port.
And the Russian stock market's up.
Well, the Russians have also delivered, we believe, these S-300 surface-to-air missiles, probably the most capable system in the world. The Russians are providing intelligence, right? They help along with the electronic monitoring and the radar stations and so forth. So if you attack Syria, this is not the cakewalk that the Anglo-Americans like to have, and I believe this is what's stopping them. So the fact that Putin has been reelected, I must say, is the best thing that's happened in the world in quite a while. I think he needs to do more. I'm not here just to say, go Putin, but he needs to take some important steps. We're on the verge of a war in the Middle East. We've got to have an initiative for a Middle East peace conference or something of that type. Putin right now is the most prestigious leader in the world, bar none, in the broad world, right? Not in the world of CBS News maybe, but out there in the real world, yes. What he needs to do is to take that political capital and use it. Let's have a general peace conference, right? The Israelis say they feel threatened. I'm sure they do. How about the Iranians? They feel threatened too. Go to the table. Lebanon needs to be
well,
rebuilt.
I know you like Pooty Poo, but I watched him go along with all these other wars. Very corrupt system over there as well. I'm asking you, how are things? That's
not even the question.
How are things going in the? But let's expand. Euro is in the middle of this, collapsing, but into this global banker receivership of fraud. They're openly butchering the Bill of Rights publicly in the United States. What's the larger global order? I mean, you're saying that the Anglo-American banker establishment is freaking out. Why are they freaking out? Where do you see things going?